Marcus froze at the school gates, gripping his backpack straps tightly. The usual route home suddenly seemed like an endless maze of obstacles. Noisy groups of school children, piercing car horn sounds, bright flashes of autumn sun on parked car windshields. All of this created a cacophony of sensations, threatening to overwhelm his consciousness. 3 steps forward, 2 right. Repeat 5 times, he whispered to himself, trying to focus on the familiar sequence of movements. It was one of the techniques Mrs. Donovan, his therapist, had taught him to cope with overstimulation. When he finally reached the quiet alley leading to his house, something unusual caught his attention. A quiet sound, almost inaudible among the rustling fallen leaves. Marcus stopped, trying to identify its source. The sound repeated, a faint meow coming from under an old oak tree. Usually, Marcus never deviated from his route. Any change in his daily routine caused him anxiety. But this sound, it was so right. Something that needed his attention. Slowly, step by step, he approached the tree. Something was moving under a pile of damp leaves. Marcus carefully brushed aside the leaves and froze. There, curled up in a trembling ball, lay a small kitten. Its fur was of an unusual, almost marble coloring. Gray, blue, and cream spots created a unique pattern that reminded Marcus of his favorite kaleidoscopic patterns. The kitten raised its head and looked at him with huge, heterochromatic eyes. One was blue, the other amber. It didn't try to run away, just quietly purred as if saying hello. "Hi," whispered Marcus, feeling his heartbeat slow down and the world around become a little less overwhelming. "Are you special too?" The kitten meowed again, a bit louder this time, and tried to stand up. Marcus noticed it was limping slightly on its back paw. For the first time in a long while, he felt he could make a decision without consulting his internal rulebook. He carefully removed his soft scarf and, trying to be as gentle as possible, wrapped the kitten in it. "Mom always says we should help those in need," he mumbled, feeling the warm body trustingly snuggle against his chest. "And you somehow make the world around it quieter." The way home suddenly seemed much easier. Even the bright sun wasn't as irritating anymore. Marcus walked, holding his precious bundle close, and for the first time in a long while, felt that he had found something truly important. He didn't know yet that this small creature would change not only his life, but the lives of many others. He didn't know that this cold autumn day would become the beginning of an amazing friendship story that would help him see the world through completely different eyes. When he approached his house, the kitten had fallen asleep in his arms, and Marcus suddenly understood one simple truth. Sometimes the best friends come into our lives exactly when we need them most, and sometimes they come on 4 paws. "Welcome home," he whispered, opening the door. "I don't know what your name is, but I think we'll figure it out together." Sarah Chen stood by the window, watching the autumn garden, when she noticed her son unusually slowly climbing the porch steps. Something was different, his posture, the way he held his arms. Her mother's heart tightened with concern. "Marcus?" she called, opening the front door. "Is everything all right?" Her son froze on the threshold, clutching a bundle made from his favorite blue scarf to his chest. Sarah had just opened her mouth to ask about the scarf. Any change in familiar things could trigger severe stress in Marcus. When the bundle moved, "Mom," Marcus spoke quietly but firmly, which was rare. "It needs help, like you always taught." Sarah carefully approached, and Marcus, to her surprise, unwrapped the scarf himself, revealing a small kitten. Usually, her son avoided direct eye contact, but now he was looking straight into her eyes, and his gaze held a determination she had never seen before. "It's special," he added. "Like me." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. In 12 years of living with autism, Marcus had rarely shown such emotional openness. She carefully extended her hand and stroked the kitten, which responded with a soft purr. "It's paw," whispered Marcus. "I think it's hurt." "Then we need to show it to a vet," Sarah said gently. "Dr. Ramirez works nearby. We can—" "No," Marcus interrupted sharply, holding the kitten closer. "Not today. Please. Too much everything." Sarah understood. The school day had already been challenging for her son, and while the new situation with the kitten sparked an unusual interest in him, it still added stress. She quickly considered her options. "Okay," she said calmly. "Let's get it settled at home first. We have an old laundry basket. We can make a soft bed there. And tomorrow morning, when you're ready, we'll go to the vet together." To her surprise, Marcus nodded without his usual resistance to schedule changes. He allowed her to hold the kitten while he retrieved the basket from storage. His movements were methodical and precise as always, but there was something new in them, a gentleness, a care. "You know," said Sarah, watching her son carefully arrange old towels in the basket, "cats are very intelligent creatures. They sense when someone needs their presence." Marcus paused, considering her words. "Like Mrs. Donovan?" he asked finally. "Does she sense too?" "Yes, dear, like Mrs. Donovan, but cats do it in their own way. They don't ask questions or expect answers. They just are there." The kitten settled in the basket, stretched and yawned, showing its pink tongue. Its heterochromatic eyes were half closed with contentment. "Doesn't look at me like others do," whispered Marcus, carefully touching the soft fur. "Doesn't expect me to be normal?" Sarah sat down next to her son, feeling her heart ache at his words. "You're right, sunshine. Cats accept us as we are. And you know what? That makes them very wise." At that moment, the door opened, and Tom, Marcus's father, entered the room, tired after a long day at the hospital. He froze in the doorway, surprised by the unexpected scene. "Do we have guests?" he asked carefully, knowing how difficult any changes in the home environment were for his son. "Dad," Marcus stood up, and his voice sounded unusually firm. "I found it. It needs us. And I think we need it too." Tom exchanged glances with his wife, noticing the tears in her eyes and the slight smile. Something was happening, something important, and for the first time in a long while, their son was the initiator of change. "Well," he said, coming closer and sitting next to the basket, "tell me about your new friend." And Marcus began to tell, slowly, carefully choosing his words, but with more enthusiasm than his parents had ever heard from him. And the kitten in the basket purred, as if confirming each of his words, and this sound filled the room with a special warmth and peace. Dr. Ramirez's veterinary clinic turned out to be a small single-story building with bright green walls. Marcus froze before the entrance, firmly holding the basket with the kitten. The bright wall color, loud sounds from the reception area, unfamiliar smells, all of this threatened to overwhelm his senses. "Breathe, sunshine," Sarah gently reminded him. "Like we practiced. Inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8, Marcus finished, closing his eyes. At that moment, the kitten in the basket quietly purred, and the boy felt the tension gradually release. Strangely, his new friend seemed to always know when Marcus needed support. In the waiting room, there were 3 other visitors: an elderly woman with a parrot in a cage, a young man with a Labrador, and a mother with a little girl who was holding a small cage with a hamster. Marcus automatically began counting steps to the farthest chair, his usual way of coping with unfamiliar situations. Suddenly, the girl with the hamster started crying. "Mom, Pixie isn't moving at all! Will he die?" The sound of crying was like an electric shock for Marcus. He felt panic beginning to rise. But then, something unexpected happened. The kitten in the basket suddenly stood up and emitted a special, melodic purr. The girl immediately fell silent, staring fascinated in their direction. Can I see your kitty?" she asked timidly. Usually, Marcus never talked to strangers, but now he felt a strange calm, as if the kitten was transmitting some of its confidence to him. "His name is Kaleido," he said quietly, surprised by the words that unexpectedly came to his mind. "Because his fur, it's like a kaleidoscope." The girl carefully approached, still holding the hamster's cage. Kaleido raised his head, and his heterochromatic eyes met the girl's. A moment later, he purred again, even more melodiously this time. "Look, Mom!" the girl exclaimed. "Pixie woke up." Indeed, the hamster in the cage suddenly stirred and began actively grooming itself, as if it had just woken from a deep sleep. "Marcus Chen," called the nurse from the office door. "Dr. Ramirez is ready to see you." Dr. Ramirez turned out to be a short woman with kind eyes and silver streaks in her dark hair. She spoke quietly and moved smoothly, which Marcus immediately liked. "So this is our new patient," she said, carefully examining Kaleido. "What unusual coloring and heterochromia, a very rare combination." She carefully examined the kitten's back paw. "Good news, there's no fracture, just a ligament strain, but there's something interesting. Have you noticed anything unusual about his behavior?" Sarah exchanged glances with her son. "He seems to sense when Marcus needs support, and just now in the waiting room, he helped the girl," Marcus unexpectedly continued, "and her hamster. He makes the world better." Dr. Ramirez looked thoughtfully at the boy, then at the kitten. "You know, in my practice, there have been special cases. Some animals have, let's call it, heightened empathy. They sense the emotional state of people and other animals much more deeply than ordinary pets. And sometimes they appear exactly where they're needed most." She paused, watching as Kaleido gently rubbed his head against Marcus's hand. "I'd say you both found exactly who you were looking for." When they left the clinic, Sarah noticed that her son was smiling, a rare and precious expression on his face. "Mom," he said, looking at Kaleido peacefully sleeping in the basket, "I think Dr. Ramirez is right. We help each other, like a team." Sarah hugged her son's shoulders, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't flinch from the touch. "Yes, dear, that's exactly what best friends do." On their way home, they stopped to buy everything necessary for the kitten, and although the trip to the pet store meant even more new impressions, Marcus seemed calm. Occasionally, he would peek into the basket, where Kaleido would respond with a quiet purr, and that was enough to make the world around seem a little less overwhelming. Evening lights were starting to come on in their neighborhood when they finally reached home. Marcus carefully carried the basket with Kaleido, reflecting on all the events of this unusual day. Something had changed, not just in his life, but in himself. And although changes usually scared him, this particular change felt right. Like a new, better way of seeing the world. A week had passed since Kaleido appeared in Marcus's life. Every morning, before going to school, the boy spent 15 minutes with his friend, telling him about the upcoming day. This became part of his new ritual, which somehow helped him cope with the school bustle. "Today, we have science project presentations," Marcus told him while stroking the cat's silky fur. "Mrs. Baker said everyone has to speak in front of the class." I'm not sure I can do it." Kaleido, who had fully recovered and now moved freely around the house, rubbed his head against Marcus's hand and purred soothingly. Marcus noticed that when he listened to this purring, his thoughts became clearer and anxiety retreated. At school, everything started as usual. Marcus sat in his spot in the last row, trying to ignore the noise around him. But when Mrs. Baker began calling students for presentations, he felt his heart beating faster. "Next up, Jason Miller," announced the teacher. Jason, a short boy with red hair, approached the board with his project about butterflies. But as soon as he began speaking, his voice trembled and went silent. Marcus noticed how Jason's hands were shaking, just like his own did when everything became too much. I, Jason stammered, his face getting redder by the moment. The class began to whisper, and suddenly Marcus remembered Kaleido's purring, remembered how the cat always found a way to calm him when things got difficult. "Maybe, breathe," he whispered, loud enough for Jason to hear. "Inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. Jason turned around, looking at Marcus in surprise. Their eyes met, for the first time in 3 years of being in the same class, and Marcus saw in his classmates' eyes that same feeling of being overwhelmed that he knew so well. "Like a butterfly breathes," Marcus added more quietly, remembering how Kaleido helped him focus on something specific. Slowly and calmly. Jason nodded and tried breathing as suggested. A moment later, his voice became steadier, and he was able to continue his presentation. When Marcus's turn came, he felt the familiar fear. But now he had a secret. He imagined he was telling his presentation not to the class, but to Kaleido. His project was about cats of different breeds, and for the first time in his life, he was talking about something that truly interested him. "Some cats have special abilities," he said, showing his drawings. "They can sense when people are feeling bad. Some even work in hospitals and help patients calm down." The class listened with unexpected attention. Even Mrs. Baker looked impressed. This was the longest monologue she had ever heard from Marcus. After class, Jason approached him. "Thanks," he said quietly. For the breathing tip. I didn't know that you understand." Marcus hesitated. Conversations with classmates were usually difficult, but something had changed since Kaleido came into his life. "My cat taught me," he replied. "He's special, like some people." "You have a cat?" Jason's eyes lit up. Can I see him sometime?" This was unexpected. Marcus had never invited anyone to his home, but he thought of Kaleido, who so easily connected with everyone. Maybe Friday after school," he suggested, surprised by his own courage. "If your parents allow, and mine too." "Cool," Jason smiled. "I did the project about butterflies because, well, they're special too. They start life as one thing and become something completely different. On his way home, Marcus thought about this conversation, about how Kaleido had changed his life, about how sometimes the most unexpected encounters can lead to the most important changes. At home, Kaleido met him at the door, and Marcus noticed that the cat was purring in a particularly satisfied way, as if he knew that today marked an important step forward. "You know," Marcus said, picking up the cat, "I think I'm starting to understand why you appeared in my life. You're teaching me to see what's special in others, and maybe helping others see something special in me." Kaleido purred in response, and his heterochromatic eyes seemed to glow with understanding. At that moment, Marcus felt ready for new changes in his life. Perhaps for the first time, he was even looking forward to them. Friday came faster than Marcus expected. He woke up early and immediately began preparing for Jason's visit, checking every detail multiple times. Kaleido watched his bustling from the windowsill, occasionally offering encouraging purrs. "Everything has to be perfect," Marcus explained to the cat, arranging toys in strict order. "This is the first time someone from school will come to my home. What if something goes wrong?" Sarah watched her son with a mixture of pride and concern. She had never seen him prepare for social interaction like this. Usually, such situations only caused him stress and a desire to avoid them. At 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Marcus froze in the middle of the room, but Kaleido immediately jumped down from the windowsill and headed toward the entrance, as if inviting his owner to follow. Jason stood at the doorstep with his mother, a short woman with the same red hair as her son. The boy was holding a small box in his hands. "Hi," Jason said quietly. I brought cookies. Mom and I baked them yesterday. They're nut-free. I specifically asked Mrs. Baker if you had any allergies." Marcus nodded, impressed by such thoughtfulness. He wanted to say something, but words, as always in new situations, got stuck in his throat. And then something unexpected happened. Kaleido, who had been sitting at Marcus's feet, suddenly approached Jason and began rubbing against his legs, purring his special, soothing melody. "Wow," Jason breathed, crouching down. "He really is special, so calm." "This is Kaleido," Marcus finally found his words. He helps me when it gets too much." "Too much?" Jason repeated, carefully petting the cat. "You mean, like in class, when everything becomes overwhelming?" Marcus looked at his new friend in surprise. No one at school had understood this feeling before. At least, no one had talked about it. While the moms chatted in the kitchen, the boys settled in Marcus's room. Jason curiously examined the collection of books about cats, and Kaleido settled between them as if supervising their interaction. "You know," Jason suddenly said, "I sometimes feel it gets too much too, especially when I have to speak in front of the class, or when there are lots of people around. Doctors say I have social anxiety." Marcus nodded slowly. "I have autism. It's like being tuned to a different frequency. Everything feels stronger." "Like butterflies," Jason said unexpectedly. "Their antennae sense the smallest changes in the air. Sometimes it helps them survive, and sometimes it makes them vulnerable." Kaleido suddenly raised his head and made a special purring sound. His heterochromatic eyes moved from one boy to the other. "Seems like he understands," Jason smiled. "Like he knows what we're talking about." "He always knows," Marcus replied. "Since I found him, everything became easier. Like he shows me that being different is okay." Jason pulled out his phone, look what I found when I was preparing for the presentation. He showed a photo of a rare butterfly with an unusual pattern on its wings. This is Morphodidius. Its wings have different shades from different angles, a bit like Kaleido's eyes. The next few hours flew by unnoticed. The boys talked about butterflies and cats, about school and how hard it sometimes is to be different. Kaleido would either doze between them or suddenly wake up and add his purring comments to the conversation. When it was time to say goodbye, Jason looked thoughtful. Can I come again sometimes? It's somehow calmer here. And Kaleido, he makes everything simpler. Of course, Marcus replied, and the word came out so easily that he surprised himself. We could study together, if you want. When Jason and his mom left, Marcus sat on the floor next to Kaleido. You knew, didn't you? He asked the cat. Knew that Jason was special too? Is that why you reacted to him like that? Kaleido purred and rubbed his head against Marcus's hand. In his heterochromatic eyes shone such wisdom that Marcus suddenly understood. Sometimes the best teachers come to us in the most unexpected forms. And sometimes the most important lessons we receive simply by opening our hearts to others. Attention, class! Mrs. Baker announced one October morning. The annual school science and creativity fair is approaching. This year, we're trying something new. Paired projects that will show how special abilities can change lives. Marcus tensed up. Group projects had always been the most challenging for him. But before he could start worrying, he felt a light touch on his shoulder. It was Jason. Maybe together, he whispered, and Marcus felt the tension gradually release. Over the past 2 weeks, he and Jason had truly become friends. 3 times a week after school, Jason would come to Marcus's house, and they would do homework together under Kaleido's supervision, who seemed to take special pleasure in their friendship. I thought, Jason said as they walked home, maybe we could do a project about therapy animals. How Kaleido helps us, and how other animals can help people too. Marcus nodded. This idea felt right. We could show different ways animals help, like how the butterflies in your collection show the beauty of change, and Kaleido teaches understanding others. At home, they spread their materials on the floor in Marcus's room. Kaleido, as always, settled between them, occasionally pushing one book or another with his paw. Look, Jason showed an article on his tablet. Some hospitals have special cats and dogs that help patients calm down. They're called therapy animals. Like Kaleido, Marcus said thoughtfully, only he does it naturally. Suddenly, Jason's eyes lit up. What if we bring Kaleido to the fair to show his special abilities? Marcus hesitated. The thought of Kaleido among the school fair crowd caused anxiety. But the cat, hearing his name, raised his head and made a special, calming purr. See? Jason smiled. He wants to help himself. The next 2 weeks flew by in preparation. The boys created a presentation about different therapy animals, collected stories about how animals help people with various needs. Marcus even agreed to record a video where he talked about his experience with Kaleido, something that had seemed impossible before. The day of the fair dawned sunny and cool. The school gym was filled with student project displays. Marcus held a special carrier with Kaleido, feeling his heart beating faster from the number of people around. Everything will be fine, Jason whispered, and Kaleido confirmed this with his purring. Their presentation was an unexpected success. People stopped at their booth, enchanted by the story of the special cat with heterochromatic eyes. Kaleido seemed to enjoy the attention, demonstrating his abilities to every visitor. A particularly impressive moment occurred when a little girl with a hearing aid approached their booth. She looked scared by the noise around, but Kaleido immediately paid attention to her. His special purring seemed to create a protective cocoon of calm around the girl. He senses when someone is struggling, Marcus explained to visitors, surprised by his own confidence, and knows how to help. Like all special beings, Jason added, showing photographs of his butterflies. They teach us to see the world differently. When the jury approached their booth, Marcus felt his usual anxiety returning. But Kaleido, as if sensing this, jumped out of his carrier and settled on the table between the judges and the boys, creating a cozy atmosphere with his presence. "An extraordinary project," said the head judge, watching how Kaleido interacted with visitors. "You haven't just told us about therapy animals, you've shown it in practice." By the end of the day, their project had received not only first prize, but also a special recognition for innovative approach. However, the real reward for Marcus was something else: the realization that he could share his special gift with others. "You know," Jason said as they were packing up their materials, "we're all a bit like Kaleido. We have our special qualities that make us unique." Marcus looked at his cat, who was peacefully sleeping in his carrier after a busy day. "Yes," he agreed, "and sometimes our special qualities aren't something that needs fixing. They're what makes us, us." December snow was falling outside Mrs. Donovan's office window when Marcus came for his weekly therapy session. This time, he wasn't alone. Kaleido, now officially registered as a therapy animal, accompanied him. "Tell me how your life has changed over the last 3 months," the therapist suggested, watching as the cat settled on Marcus's lap. The boy thought for a moment, automatically stroking the silky fur. "Everything has changed," he said finally. "But not like things usually change. Not scary. More like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon." Mrs. Donovan smiled, remembering the silent boy who first came to her 3 years ago. "Tell me more about these changes." "Well, after the school fair, Principal Peterson proposed creating a therapy animal program for students who have special needs. Jason and I help. Kaleido comes to school twice a week." He paused, watching snowflakes dance outside the window. "And you know what's strangest? Now other kids don't look at me like I'm weird. They ask about Kaleido, about how he helps. Some even talk about their own difficulties. We have a club now, Jason and I," he continued with a note of pride in his voice. "It's called Special Friends. We meet after school and talk about what it's like to be different, and about animals that help. Last week, Emily, the girl with the hearing aid, brought her hamster. He senses music vibrations and dances. It was fun." Mrs. Donovan made a note in her notebook. "Seems like you found your way of connecting with others." "Yes," Marcus nodded. "Kaleido taught me that sometimes words aren't necessary. Sometimes just being there and understanding is enough." Kaleido purred, as if agreeing, and his heterochromatic eyes seemed particularly bright in the winter light. "How are things at home?" the therapist asked. "Better," Marcus replied. "Dad says I've become more present, and Mom worries less. Also," he paused, "I've started playing the piano." This was news to Mrs. Donovan. "Really?" "Yes, turns out Kaleido loves music. When Mom plays, he sits next to her and purrs in tune. One day I tried and it wasn't scary. The sounds create patterns like his fur. And when it gets too much, he's always there." Outside, The snow was falling more heavily, creating a white curtain beyond the window. Marcus watched it with unusual calm. Previously, sharp changes in lighting often bothered him. "You know," he said suddenly, "sometimes I think Kaleido didn't appear in my life by accident. Like he knew I needed him, and not just me." "What do you mean?" "Well, after the fair, Dr. Ramirez came to visit us. She told us that sometimes special animals are born with a gift for helping others. She even wants to write an article about Kaleido for some scientific journal." Mrs. Donovan smiled. "And how do you feel about that?" "Good," Marcus answered after a short pause. "Before, I didn't like attention, but now I understand. Being special doesn't mean being alone. It means having your unique way of seeing the world and helping others." Kaleido stretched and rolled over on his back, offering his belly for petting. His purring filled the room with a soothing melody. "And you know what's best?" Marcus's eyes sparkled. "In spring, Jason and I are starting a new project. We're going to grow plants that attract butterflies right in the schoolyard, to create a place where all special beings can feel at home." When the session ended and Marcus left with Kaleido into the snowy day, Mrs. Donovan watched them for a long time. In her years of practice, she had seen many different types of therapy, but she had never encountered anything quite like the connection between this special boy and his unusual cat. And Marcus walked home, feeling snowflakes melt on his face, and for the first time in his life, truly understood. Sometimes our greatest challenges can become our greatest gifts. You just need to meet someone who helps you see it. And sometimes that someone comes to us on 4 paws, with heterochromatic eyes and a heart big enough to change more than one life.